Laydons' lab was silent. Too silent. He frowned at the screens lining the wall. Heart monitors, motion sensors, chemical readouts, all of them blinking blank with static, or simply gone. Impossible, he muttered. His hand hovered over the console. Every tracker implanted in Hallie's body had been feeding live data, giving him a complete picture of her vitals and location. Now, every signal was dead. He slammed his fist against the desk. She's gone. The assistant nearest him swallowed hard. Sir, maybe it's a system glitch? Laydons' eyes were cold, calculating. A glitch doesn't disable every tracker simultaneously. Someone extracted her. Someone knows her patterns. He stood, voice sharp. Seal the lab. Lock all exits. I want all surveillance footage from the past 48 hours. Every camera, every drone, every sensor. Cross-reference it. I want her back. Technicians scrambled. Laydon moved from station to station, his mind racing faster than the computers could process. Every scenario ran through him. She'd gone rogue. She'd been taken. Or worse, she'd been caught off guard. He clenched his jaw. Mobilize the field teams. Every agent in the Pacific Northwest. Use everything: air, ground, local contacts. I want Hallie Walltone located and contained before she disappears into the wilderness. A junior analyst hesitated. Sir, we may not have time. Whoever took her, they likely have technology or magic we haven't accounted for. Laydon didn't flinch. I don't care. Start the hunt and double the bounty on whoever interfered. I want answers, and I want them alive if possible. Hallie Walltone isn't lost. Not while I still breathe. He walked to the wall of monitors and stared at the blinking empty signal that once belonged to her. His mind worked through all possibilities, every enemy she'd faced, every potential abduction scenario, every mercenary, hunter, and vampire with enough audacity to take her from him. Laydon's fingers drummed on the console. His voice dropped, quiet but dangerous. Bring her back. No matter the cost. Across the facility, agents and field operatives mobilized. Satellite feeds were accessed, helicopters prepared. Laydon watched it all unfold, a predator in his own right, calculating every possible path she could have taken. And yet, a faint unease settled in his gut. Hallie Walltone wasn't just a hunter. She learned. She adapted. And whoever had taken her had just set in motion a game where Laydon was no longer in control. He tapped his forehead. Mark every potential vector. Begin the hunt. Every second counts. Find her before she finds them first. Outside, the wind picked up. Somewhere in the forest of the Cascades, Hallie's trail had gone cold, but Laydon would follow it, no matter how far, because she was never just his asset. She was his creation. And he didn't lose creations. Hallie's eyes snapped open. The room was dimly lit and unfamiliar. Her wrists ached from the restraints, but worse, she could feel the cold metal sliding off her skin straps and implants being ripped free. The sensation was precise, professional, like the work of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. She sat up sharply. Two figures moved in the shadows, quick and silent. Their movements weren't human. Too swift, too wiry, unnervingly fast. Hallie's instincts flared. "Ah!" a voice whispered, silky and amused. Finally awake. Her senses surged. She could smell their perfume, masking something sharper. Vampiric, she realized instantly. Familiars. One of them crouched near her side, deft hands working the last of her implants. "Your master will be displeased," the second said, voice smooth, almost playful. "But you will serve another purpose now." Hallie flexed her hands, testing the restraints. Her pulse began to race, hunger buzzing faintly behind her focus. She forced it down, not now, Not here. She remembered the encounter in the ravine, the Lycan's message. Lord Halbert, pure-blood lord. Plan C works perfectly when the prey is disoriented, the taller familiar murmured. You were. Predictable. Hallie's lips curled into a faint, deadly smile. Predictable? You don't even know the half of it. The two moved closer, not hiding their amusement. Hallie's senses took in everything, the slight twitch of their fangs beneath the shadows, the subtle pulse of magic in the room, the faint metallic scent of the tools they carried. She tested the edges of her restraints with her newfound strength. They were secure, designed for human, or even enhanced human muscle, but not her muscle. You are strong, one familiar said, but you are alone. Master will reward your compliance. Hallie shifted slightly, feeling the weight of the hunger and adrenaline coiling together. She didn't resist yet, not recklessly, but she memorized everything. Their position, their movement patterns, the subtle rhythm of their breathing. I don't take orders, he said quietly, a warning in her tone. The familiars exchanged a glance. Ah, the shorter one whispered. She fights. Hallie's eyes glinted. Every second she waited, she was mapping, learning. This wasn't a fight she could win head-on. Not yet, but she knew one thing. Even captured, she was far from helpless. She flexed her hands again, feeling the faint tingle of regeneration humming in her veins. Hunger, strength, speed, all tuned to a razor's edge. The familiars didn't notice the twitch of her fingers, the subtle lean of her body preparing to spring. Plan C had worked for them, but Hallie Walltone had survived far worse, and she always adapted. And when the time came, they would find that she was the hunter, not the hunted. Hallie let the familiars chatter, their arrogance filling the small room. Every word, every movement was logged in her mind. She wasn't going to rush, not yet. She was learning, calculating, tasting the edges of her new abilities. Her fingers twitched subtly against the restraints, feeling the tension in the metal. Most humans would have struggled and screamed. Most vampires would have struggled and lost control. But Hallie wasn't most vampires. The stabilizer had given her control. The serum had enhanced her senses. The Lycan fight had pushed her body further than she thought possible. She felt it now, strength coiling like a spring, speed humming beneath her skin, reflexes honed sharper than any weapon. The familiars moved closer, leaning over her, eager to intimidate. Hallie's eyes tracked every muscle, every shift in weight. Her senses picked up the subtle pulse of their magic, the minuscule adjustments they made to keep her restrained. She tested the bonds. One hand moved in a blur, the restraints flexing, then snapping slightly under her newfound strength. The familiar closest leaned in to whisper, Master will, and that was all the warning she needed. Hallie's arms shot up faster than thought. With a single controlled twist, she ripped the nearest restraint free, metal snapping like brittle wire. The familiar's eyes went wide, but she was already moving. In one fluid motion, she rolled to her feet, brass-knuckled fist connecting with the taller familiar's jaw, sending him sprawling against the wall. The second one tried to react, but she was a blur, speed and power amplifying her movements. Her leg lashed out, kicking aside the last restraining mechanism. Then she grabbed him, twisted, and slammed him into the ground with bone-jarring force. Hallie didn't pause. She was already at the door, moving with inhuman precision, senses attuned to the faintest sound, the tiniest shadow. A glimpse of light from the hallway, a twitch of movement, all registered instantly. When the familiar on her flank lunged to intercept, she met him with a brass-knuckled uppercut that sent him airborne across the room. Hallie's breathing was steady, calm, controlled, and the faint golden glow in her eyes pulsed as the serum and her own metabolism fed her strength. She wasn't just a hunter anymore, nor just a vampire. The two familiars groaned and tried to rise, but she moved first, in a fluid motion, fist connecting with one's jaw, hard enough to send him sprawling across the floor. The second came at her, claws swinging, but she sidestepped, twisting, landing a knee to the gut before a short, precise punch to the throat left him gasping. She stepped over them both, chest heaving, every muscle taut, her senses alive with the faint metallic tong of blood and the subtle hum of residual magic. Even restrained, these creatures had underestimated her, badly. Hallie headed for the exit, ready to disappear into the shadows and vanish entirely. The hallways stretched ahead, quiet except for the faint echoes of her own footsteps. She could almost taste her freedom. Then a voice cut through the still air, smooth, dangerous. Going somewhere? Hallie froze. A figure stepped from the darkness at the end of the corridor, tall, elegant, pale as moonlight, with eyes that gleamed gold in the dim light. His movements were measured, confident, and utterly predatory. He smiled faintly, a slow, knowing curve of his lips. "I've been expecting you. Quite the display back there. Impressive." Hallie didn't answer. She tightened her fists, knives flashing at her sides. Her instincts screamed caution. She could feel his power, the subtle hum of centuries of experience and strength. Vincent tilted his head, studying her. "I wonder just how far you've come since the serum, Hallie Walltone. I'd hoped we might speak before things got violent." Her gaze didn't waver. "I don't negotiate." His smile widened. "No? Then I suppose we'll find out just how much you've learned." Hallie shifted slightly, weight low, ready to spring. She could feel every tiny vibration in the floor, every scent on the air. But Vincent didn't move. He let her sense the danger, let her feel the predatory patience coiled in him like a spring. This wasn't just another fight. This was a warning. And for the first time since her capture, Hallie knew that escaping the familiars was only the beginning. Hallie's hands flexed, knives at the ready. Vincent didn't rush her. He moved with calm precision, letting her test her reflexes, her strength. Her fists and knives flew in practiced arcs, each strike sharp and controlled. Vincent deflected, blocked, sidestepped, evading everything she threw at him, never striking to harm, only to measure. She lunged, spinning, catching him across the shoulder. He tilted, barely felt it, then countered with a smooth wrist twist, redirecting her momentum. She landed on her feet, breathing steady, aware that every move was being analyzed, weighed, and cataloged. "Interesting," he murmured, voice smooth as silk. "You've adapted well since the serum, though I expected more ferocity." Hallie's jaw tightened. She lunged again, more aggressively this time, knives flashing. He blocked, twisted, and brought her to a halt without landing a real strike. Every movement from him was deliberate, testing, teaching, no intent to kill. Then a shadow fell over the entire room. Vincent didn't react immediately, only tilted his head. But Hallie turned, instinctively poised. Lord Helbert, the boss, stepped into the light. His presence filled the room like a physical weight. Pale skin, aristocratic features, eyes like molten amber. Centuries of power emanated from him. "Hallie Walltone," he said, voice calm but commanding. "I've watched your work, your skill, your discipline. It's remarkable. And wasted, unless aligned properly." She didn't flinch. "I don't work for anyone." Halbert's gaze swept over her, assessing, calculating. "I'm offering you more than work. I offer power, resources, immortality on your own terms. You'd command part of my private army, shape it, lead it. There is no leash, only opportunity." Hallie's eyes narrowed. Well, while all that sounds amazing, and it does, I've already seen what people like you do to control others. So listen up. I don't join families, clans, or armies. Vincent stepped slightly forward, almost as a shield, but Halbert's hand gestured lightly. The room shifted. Hallie's gut told her it was magic, subtle and invasive, probing. She lunged, attacking Halbert with a flurry of knives and brass-knuckled strikes, but centuries of power met her strikes. He didn't flinch, he barely moved, and each of her hits landed with the hollow thud of failure. She realized quickly that this wasn't a fight she could win with force. Halbert smiled faintly, emotion so slight it could have been a shadow. You are strong, clever, but you are still a human in comparison. Vincent circled her, calm, almost admiring, as she fought to land a single effective blow. Hallie's muscles burned, her reflexes screamed, but every strike met invisible barriers. Every attempt was absorbed, deflected, or neutralized. Halbert raised his hand. One subtle motion, and a wave of pressure struck her. Her vision blurred, her limbs heavy, as if gravity itself was pulling her down. She struggled, twisting, fighting the invisible bonds, but it was useless. Sleep, Halbert whispered, and the world went black. Laydons stood over the command console, fingers drumming impatiently. The screens were black, the trackers silent. Nothing, muttered the analyst beside him, voice tight with tension. All sensors offline. No signals from any field units. It's like she vanished. Laydon's jaw clenched. She hasn't vanished. She's been taken. And whoever has her. He slammed his palm against the console, making the monitors flicker. They know what they're doing. Every move she made, every tracker disabled. He paced the room with long strides, mind working through every possibility. Vampires? Mercenaries? Rogue factions? None made sense, except one. This was professional, calculated, deliberate. Laydon rubbed his forehead, thinking, "It has to be a vampire. No one else would dare," he muttered. "We can't let the bloodsuckers have her." "We find her and take her back by force." The assistant hesitated. "Sir, if they're a pureblood, we might not even know their limitations." Laydon stopped pacing. His eyes, hard as steel, met hers. "Then we learn them. Every weakness, every signature. She is my asset, and I do not lose assets." He tapped a screen, bringing up her last known coordinates, the ravine in the Cascades. He tapped the screen again at a point close to a town. "Start with here. Expand outward. I want nothing missed. We find her, and we find out who dared to take her from me before it's too late." Time was the only enemy he hadn't accounted for yet. Hallie woke to the echo of dripping water and the faint scent of damp stone. The air was heavy, ancient, the kind that carried centuries of whispers. She was in a dungeon, deep and old, built before anyone living remembered how. Iron bars framed the room, and the only light came from torches flickering down the corridor. She sat up, head pounding like a tribal drum. She could hear footsteps, slow and deliberate. Vincent appeared at the gate, carrying a tray, a silver goblet, and a plate of food. Real food, not the kind of meal she'd seen in captivity before. "Awake! Finally," he said smoothly, unlocking the cell with a metallic click. "You heal quickly. Remarkable." She pushed herself upright, every muscle coiled tight. Her eyes tracked him as he stepped inside and set the tray on the table beside her bed. "Eat. You'll need your strength," he said. "My father thinks we can reason with you, but I think we'll need to understand you first." Hallie eyed the food, then Vincent. "You studying me or feeding me?" He smiled faintly. "Both." She didn't touch it, her silence stretched, defiant. He chuckled softly, still stubborn. "Good. I would have been disappointed if you'd gone soft." He turned to leave, adding, "Eat. You'll need it." When the door closed behind him, Hallie sat motionless for a long time, the tension thrumming in her veins. She knew something was about to happen, but what? Then came the sound she was waiting for, the scrape of steel boots on stone. The first vampire challenger stepped through the gate, a tall man with long hair. He offered no words, no threats. It just came with hunger and command in its eyes. Hallie rose, cracking her neck. The fight was fast, brutal. She finished it with a combo ending in a bone-crunching elbow. One down, then another came. Then two, then three. She couldn't keep up. When five came all at once, she fell, bloodied and beaten. She awoke hours later, as good as new. But minutes after she peeled herself off the ground, it started again. Each time she fell, she woke later to the same nightmare. The ache deeper, her patience thinner. They were testing her, measuring her power, her endurance, her restraint. She refused to give them the satisfaction of breaking her, even when they flooded her cell with opponents, one after another. When she woke again for the 10th time, the torches burned lower, and Vincent was there again, calm, composed, unreadable. But this time, he wasn't alone. A man stood behind him, human, young and trembling like a leaf, wearing the faint silver collar of a familiar. His pulse was loud in the silence, the scent sharp and unmistakable. Vincent's tone was almost clinical. "We've seen how well you fight. Now we see how well you control yourself." Hallie's muscles locked. The hunger flared somewhere deep inside, primal and cold. She could feel it stirring, whispering. The familiar took a shaky step forward. Hallie glared at Vincent. "You think I'm one of you?" He met her stare with that same quiet curiosity. "That's what we're trying to determine." The hunger gnawed harder, her heartbeat sinking to the humans, but she stayed still. Every instinct screamed at her to move, to strike, to feed. Instead, she turned her back on the human and sat down again, her jaw tight. "Find another experiment," she said evenly. "I'm not your pet." Vincent studied her for a long moment, unreadable as ever. Then, quietly, he smiled. "Good," he said, turning toward the door. "You just passed your first real test." The cell door slammed shut behind him, and in the dark, Hallie exhaled, shaking from the effort of staying human. Time crawled in the dungeon. The torches had burned low, shadows pooling along the floor like ink. Hallie sat cross-legged on the cold stone, eyes half closed, listening to the faint scrape of rats and the drip of water somewhere far below. Hours passed, maybe more. Then footsteps, 2 sets. The door groaned open and 2 vampires stepped in, armor glinting in the torchlight. Their faces were blank, mechanical. One gestured with a short bow. "The master will see you." Hallie rose slowly, every muscle quiet but ready. They bound her wrists with cold silver manacles, unnecessary but symbolic, and led her through winding stone halls to a tall set of doors that swung open at their approach. Lord Halbert sat behind a long carved table, papers and old maps spread before him. The room smelled of incense and old dust. Vincent stood at his side, silent and still as a statue. Halbert didn't rise. He just looked her over, calm and assessing. "You surprise me, Hallie Walltone. Few resist for long. Even fewer refuse when offered sustenance." She didn't respond. "You're starving yourself," he continued, voice mild. "And for what? Pride? Defiance?" "There's strength in embracing what you've become." Hallie's glare could have cut glass. "I'm not you." Halbert's smile was faint, patient. You misunderstand. You already are us. Whether you feed or not changes nothing, but it could make you stronger, faster. You could be done talking, Hallie snapped. She moved first. The chains shattered like glass as she lunged, crossing the distance between them in a heartbeat. Halbert didn't flinch. His hand rose lazily, catching her wrist mid-strike, then twisting. The impact sent her sprawling backward across the marble floor. Vincent stepped forward, ready to intervene, but Halbert waved him off again. No, let her learn, Vincent. Hallie came at him again, a blur of fists and fury, but every attack found only empty air or an invisible wall of pressure. Then, he struck. The force that hit her chest felt like being thrust into a wall of iron. She hit the ground hard, breath gone, vision spinning. You are powerful, Halbert said calmly, but raw power without control is only destruction. You could rule beside us, not against us. She spat blood onto the floor, smirking faintly. I've never been good at taking orders. Halbert's eyes narrowed, the first real flicker of annoyance breaking through the calm. Pity. He gestured, and the two guards stepped forward. They grabbed her arms roughly, dragging her toward the door. But as they reached the corridor, Hallie's muscles coiled again on pure instinct. The first guard never saw her elbow coming. The second went down with a snapped jaw and a kick that sent him through the archway. She tore one's blade from his belt, spun, and slashed the chains from her wrists in a shower of sparks. The corridor erupted with alarms. She sprinted, boots hammering against the stone, blood pounding in her ears. Arrows hissed past. A door burst open ahead. Two more vampires appeared, blades drawn. Hallie ducked, spun low, and drove her shoulder into one's gut, sending him tumbling down the stairs. The other swung. She caught his wrist, twisted, and slammed him into the wall hard enough to crack the masonry. The castle echoed with shouts now, the sound of pursuit rising. Hallie didn't look back. She didn't need to. Every instinct told her one truth. If she stayed, she was done, and she wasn't done yet. The last stairway twisted upward toward a faint light, the exit. Hallie's lungs burned as she ran, the echo of her footsteps mixing with the distant alarm bells. The air was colder here, carrying the scent of soil and stone. But as she reached the archway, a tall figure stepped out of the shadows and blocked her path. It was Vincent. He didn't draw his weapon. He just stood there, coat brushing the floor, pale eyes watching her like a curious cat. You move fast, he said. Faster than most I've seen survive Father's tests. Hallie slowed, circling slightly, her knife steady in her hand. You gonna try to stop me? I was told to, he said calmly, but I'm not sure I want to. Their eyes locked, the tension between them humming like a drawn wire. For a long moment, neither moved. Then, Hallie lunged. Vincent flowed aside with supernatural grace, his coat flaring and her blade cut nothing but air. She spun, low and fast, kicking at his legs, but he caught her ankle and pushed her backward, sending her sliding across the floor. She rolled up with blood on her lip, grinning. You holding back? Maybe. His tone was almost playful. Show me why I shouldn't. She came again, fainting high, before driving low, using the wall to spring forward. Her knee hit his ribs. Her elbow grazed his jaw. Then he caught her wrist mid-strike, twisted it, and then released her instead of finishing the move. You're improving, he murmured. Hallie glared, panting, and you're wasting my time. She charged again, faster this time, feint, kick, spin, strike. He blocked two, dodged the third, but the fourth caught him across the cheek. Blood welled bright against his pale skin. Vincent blinked, touched it, and smiled faintly. Good hit. He stepped aside, gesturing to the archway behind him. Go, before I change my mind. Hallie hesitated, confused by the lack of malice in his tone, but she didn't wait long enough to question it. She darted past him, sprinting up the tunnel toward the pale light ahead. The corridor sloped upward, rough-hewn from ancient rock. The air grew heavier, colder, thick with a metallic scent. As she neared the next bend, her boots crunched on something brittle. She glanced down. Bones? Lots of bones. Dozens of them, all over the floor. She slowed. The faint light ahead flickered strangely, like fire reflected on metal. Then the shadows moved. From the walls and alcoves, shapes began to stir. Skeletal figures clad in scraps of rusted armor, their eyes faintly glowing blue beneath crumbling helms. Draugr, dozens, maybe hundreds, guarding the way to the surface. Hallie exhaled, flexing her fingers around her knife. Guess you don't make anything easy down here. The nearest Draugr hissed, drawing its sword with a sound like nails on stone. Hallie grinned through her exhaustion, rolling her shoulders. Fine, let's dance. The first Draugr lunged from the dark, a rattling blur of rust and bone. Hallie sidestepped, drove her knee into its chest, and crushed its skull with a single, savage punch. Fragments of bone burst like splintered glass. Another came from behind. She spun, driving her blade up beneath its jaw, wrenching it free in a rain of dust. The narrow tunnel shook with the echo of battle, steel on stone, claws on flesh, the growl of something half human and half beast. She moved like a storm through them, ducking, weaving, kicking, and slashing with lethal precision. The serum's effects made her faster, stronger, almost untouchable, but now its effects gone, she felt exhausted. One Draugr grabbed her by the throat. She broke its arm, ripped off its jaw, and hurled it into the others. A dozen came at once, crowding her in the tunnel. She charged through them, bones shattered beneath her blows. Rusted weapons snapped in half. Bloodless dust filled the air like ash from a dying fire. When the last one fell, Hallie stood panting, covered in ancient grime, her pale skin streaked with black ichor. She took a step forward, then another, and there, at the end of the tunnel, she saw it. Daylight. She broke into a sprint, bursting through the mouth of a stone cavern and out into blinding brightness. The air hit her like a shock, cold, clean, and salty. She collapsed to her knees on rough sand, breathing hard, then laughing, wild, uncontrollable laughter that echoed across the cliffs. For a second, she was just alive, but another laugh joined hers. Soft at first, then clearer. She turned, squinting against the sun, and saw Vincent standing a few yards away, hands in his pockets, his pale hair tousled by the sea wind. He looked maddeningly composed, as if the chaos below had been a mere game. "Quite the view, isn't it?" he said, voice laced with sarcasm. Hallie blinked, confused, then looked past him. Her laughter died. The ocean stretched in every direction, endless and empty. The horizon curved like glass, no ships, no land, just waves and wind and a mocking gull's cry. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered. Vincent tilted his head. "We call it Isla Halbert, Father's personal estate. I did warn you not everything down there was a prison." Her pulse spiked, fury rising in her chest. "You think this is funny?" "A little," he admitted, smirking. "You should have seen your face." That was the last straw. Hallie screamed and charged him. Moving so fast, she was a blur, her fist slamming toward his jaw. He dodged by a hair's breadth, his coat snapping like wings. She came again, elbow, knee, blade, kick, a whirlwind of violence born of frustration and rage. Vincent blocked 2 strikes, parried a third, but the fourth hit home, a sharp crack across his ribs. He stumbled back, genuinely surprised, and Hallie took advantage, slamming into him with both fists. He hit the ground, but only for a moment. In a flash, he rolled, swept her legs out, and pinned her, his strength suddenly monstrous. "Enough," he snarled, voice cutting through her fury. She thrashed, teeth bared, eyes wild, but his grip tightened until the fight drained out of her. He leaned close, his tone quieter now. "You really think I'd let you leave that easy?" Her head snapped back as he struck the side of her neck, a sharp, precise hit. The world blurred, then her vision tilted sideways as the sand rose up to meet her. The last thing she saw before the darkness swallowed her was Vincent's pale face above her, unreadable except for the faintest trace of regret. Darkness pressed against her skull like a hand. Hallie opened her eyes slowly, breath shallow, body trembling. Her limbs felt hollow, light, and drained. The kind of exhaustion she only felt when the hunger stirred under her skin. The stone floor beneath her was cold. The air smelled of dust, metal, and something ancient. A whisper scraped through the dark. "Hallie." It wasn't Vincent's voice, nor anyone she knew. The voice was dry, raspy, almost wrong. She pushed herself upright, eyes scanning the shadows. Before she could answer, the iron bolts rattled. The cell door shuddered as someone outside began to yank it open. Hallie clenched her fists, ready. Then, boom. A burst of pale light exploded inward like a magical concussion wave. It hit her full force. She slammed against the rear wall so hard her vision shattered into black pinpoints. Then nothing. When she opened her eyes again, she was still on the floor, spine pressed to the same cold stone. The door lay broken and crooked on its hinges, open now, the air beyond strangely still. Hallie staggered to her feet, head pounding, and stepped into the corridor. The torches in the hallway flickered weakly, and that's when she saw him. Vincent, or what was left of him. Vincent lay against the opposite wall, clothes shredded, arm missing. His body twisted unnaturally as if something had tried to tear him apart. Even like this, he was conscious, clutching what remained of himself together with trembling hands. "Hallie!" His voice was thin and ragged. "Don't. Please, don't come any closer." She froze. The hall smelled like iron and cold and something that made the hunger snap awake inside her like a live wire. Her stomach clenched painfully. Vincent tried to push himself upright and failed. "Listen to me," he gasped. "You're not ready for this. The hunger. You have to fight it." But the scent overwhelmed her, not blood itself, but the energy of a wounded vampire, leaking out like heat from a crack in a furnace. Hallie swayed toward him, breath shaking. Vincent's eyes widened. "No, Hallie, don't!" She tried to step back, tried to turn away, tried to be stronger than the thing crawling through her veins. But her body moved on its own. She dropped to her knees beside him. Vincent's hand lifted weakly, pressing against her shoulder in warning. "Please," he whispered, "not like this." Her lips trembled as she leaned in, and the moment the connection formed, the world fell away. Not gore, not violence, just power, rushing into her like lightning. A surge of strength and vitality that flooded her starving senses until the hunger dissolved into something bright and terrifying. Vincent's voice, thin as dust, whispered one last warning. "Hallie, he did this on purpose." She didn't hear the rest. The world just went white. Hallie stood over Vincent's half-devoured remains, the last traces of crimson still burning down her throat like fire. Then, the world snapped into perfect, terrifying clarity. Power roared through her veins. Her vision sharpened to needle points. Every sound in the fortress became a whisper in her ear. For a moment, she simply stood with shuddering breaths, marveling at the strength thrumming in her bones. A guttural snarl echoed from deeper in the corridor. Out of the shadows lurched a hulking, feral ghoul, skin gray and cracked, eyes glowing faintly. A dusty old cowboy hat perched absurdly on its head. It staggered, snorted, then fixed its hungry gaze directly on her. Hallie tensed, expecting the inevitable rush, but instead, nothing. The creature sniffed the air, head twitching in fast, jerky movements. Then, with a low groan, almost like submission, it backed away. It didn't attack. It didn't even threaten her. It feared her. Or worse, it recognized what she'd become. Hallie stepped past it, feeling its stare linger as she walked toward Halbert's office. The heavy doors burst inward under the force of Hallie's kick, slamming against the walls. Halbert stood behind his desk, hands clasped behind his back as though he'd been expecting her for hours. He didn't flinch. "I assume," he said calmly, "that Vincent failed in his duties." "He's dead," Hallie growled, voice resonating with a new iron edge. "And you set him up. You knew about that thing in the halls, didn't you?" A thin smile touched Halbert's lips. "Of course I knew. Vincent was always destined for irrelevance. A pureblood's death is useful, especially when offered to someone who has already tasted enhancement." Hallie's eyes widened. "You planned this." "I engineered it," he corrected. "You needed the push. True evolution requires suffering." His fingers began tracing faint sigils in the air. "Now show me if the investment was worth it." She launched at him with speed she didn't know she possessed, in a blur of claws and rage. Halbert's hand snapped up and a shimmering barrier erupted, barely stopping her strike. The impact cracked the magically reinforced floor beneath them. He grunted, actually grunted, as her second blow shattered the ward. Lightning bright runes erupted around him. Chains of spectral light lashed out, wrapping around Hallie's limbs. She tore free of them like they were cobwebs. Halbert's eyes flickered with something she had never seen on him: fear. He hurled spells, blasts of force, binding circles, and hypnotic sigils, but Hallie smashed through each one, growing faster, stronger, as the fight escalated. She caught him by the throat mid-incantation, lifting him off the ground with one hand. "You used me," she snarled. "I elevated you," he choked. "You're done," she growled. With a roar, she dragged him down the corridor, his boots scraping uselessly against the stone. He hurled curses, threats, pleas, but she never loosened her grip. They reached the outer platform overlooking the roaring sea below. Halbert's eyes were wide now, wild. "Hallie, wait, think." She didn't. She dragged him out, cowering from the sun, and hurled him over the edge. He hit the water with a distant splash, then vanished beneath the waves as the tide pulled him under. Hallie stood there, chest heaving, triumphant, powerful, unstoppable. That's when she saw it. A boat. She marched towards it, hardly taking any notice of the two men hiding in the shadows of the cave. She was about to board when a deep voice called out her name. "Hallie, we're here to get you." "I'm not Hallie," she responded without looking. A second man stepped from the shadows. "Yes, you are Hallie." She tried to ignore them, well aware they were Laydons' goons. But before she could get into the boat, she looked back to see this huge, muscular, bald soldier, clearly enhanced himself, stepping towards her, reaching out. She had no intentions of returning to Laydons' prison, and adrenaline just kicked in. The next few seconds were like a blur of motion. She moved instinctively, without thought, as if it was second nature. She hit the big guy several times before he could react. then dodged a bullet from the second man, zipping behind him and knocking him out cold with a single chop. The big guy shouted and came at her harder. She struck with a single strike, driving her fist right into his chest. The fight was over in moments, but to her, it felt as if the world had slowed to a stop around her. The big guy toppled backwards dead, and that's when she came to her senses again, looking down at his body, feeling ashamed. There was no time for regrets. She had to move now before more turned up. So she pushed out the boat, jumped aboard, and paddled as fast as she could without stopping. Waves crashed over her little boat, trying to drag the vessel back to the island. But she managed to row out far enough that the current switched and took her out into the open ocean. The little wooden skiff ground against the sand with a muted scrape. Hallie stepped out into the shallows, boots sinking into the cool silt, and hauled the boat up just long enough to rip off its oars. Then she shoved it back into the surf with one hard push. The tide dragged it outward. In minutes, it was drifting toward the horizon, evidence erased. She wiped seawater from her face and crouched low among the shoreline rocks. The moon cast a pale silver wash over the beach, enough for her heightened vision to catch movement. 2 government search teams, flashlights bobbing, voices clipped, fanned out along the sand. Her name murmured through their radios, her last coordinates, the assumption that she was still somewhere on the island. They didn't know she'd already escaped. One soldier swept his beam over the dunes, passing within inches of her crouched form. She could smell his coffee, the rubber of his gloves, the faint tong of gun oil. She held her breath. Then the team moved on. Hallie slowly slipped inland. She needed to get off the grid. Anywhere would do for now, just as long as they didn't find her. The smell hit her first: yeast, barley, and cold metal. A brewery's backyard loading dock sat nestled behind an old warehouse, lights dimmed for closing. Delivery wagons lined the gravel lot. Perfect. Hallie darted across the open space, movements light, controlled. She eased open the canvas flap of the largest wagon and slipped inside. Crates of bottles clinked softly as she crawled between them, settling deep in the shadows. Minutes later, the engine rumbled to life. The truck rolled out onto the road, heading inland. Hallie didn't sleep, but she drifted, half aware, half dead, letting the hum of the engine settle the chaotic power still raging inside her. They crossed state lines hours later, the scent of pine giving way to farmland and open highways. A sign flashed by. "Welcome to Ohio." She stiffened. The driver was humming, relaxed, oblivious of what he was carrying. Perfect. Hallie gripped the edge of the canvas with one hand and rolled out of the moving truck, hitting the grass and gravel with a controlled tumble. She slid down a shallow embankment, breath steady, not a single bruise forming on her pale skin. By the time the brewery wagon disappeared in the distance, Hallie was already standing, already scanning the quiet, open fields, already planning her next move. She would vanish into the hills out there and hopefully stay lost forever. Laydons' laboratory was quiet, too quiet. Rows of technicians hunched over screens, pretending not to watch him pacing like a caged wolf at the center of the control room. He'd been monitoring the island feed for hours. A phone rang, not the internal line, not any line his people controlled, a private number. He hesitated, but only for a second. "Malcolm?" A distorted voice slid through the speaker, crackling like static on an old tape. "She's gone." Laydon froze. "Who is this?" Irrelevant. Listen carefully. Your captive has left the island. The pureblood, his son, and every vampire under him are dead. The room seemed to tilt. The caller continued, unbothered by Laydon's silence. Whatever you fed that woman, whatever you made her, has reached a stage you no longer control. Then the line clicked dead. Laydon stared at the receiver, knuckles whitening around the plastic. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as he lowered the phone. His most valuable subject, his greatest success, his most frightening mistake, gone. Again. "Sir?" one of the analysts ventured. "Should we?" Laydon cut him off with a raised hand. Then, in a voice cold enough to frost glass, "Lock down every border district within 5 states. She is out there, and she is unstable." The room snapped into action, alerts flashing, teams mobilizing, maps updating. Laydon watched the chaos unfold with an expression that was almost grief, almost rage. He had poured too much time into Hallie. Months of research, of enhancements, of pushing her beyond what even monsters could endure. And now? Now, she was a phantom in the wild, untethered and supercharged by pure blood essence. Driven by a hunger his formulas had only barely kept in check. He slammed both hands on the table. "She was perfect," he hissed, "and now she's a storm." One of his senior officers approached nervously. "Sir, with respect, if she's that powerful, why chase her? Why not let her burn herself out?" Laydon turned slowly, eyes hollow and sharp, "Because I don't have the luxury of losing what I built." Then, softer, "And because she is not the only project nearing completion." The officer swallowed. Laydon straightened his coat, smoothed back his hair, and stared at the darkened monitor showing the last still image of Hallie before the feed was cut. Strong, defiant, becoming something absolutely new. He whispered to himself, "She thinks she escaped me." A small, humorless smile pulled at his mouth. "She has no idea what comes next." He turned to his assistant. "Get me Hank, right now. I need him here for what's about to start." Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the series. Please like, share, subscribe if you haven't already, and I hope you'll drop a comment. It's much appreciated. Stay tuned for more information about what's going to happen to Hallie and the rest of Laydon's assets. Until next time.